From Highmark Stadium, Matt Parrino here with Ryan Talbot. Shout out Buffalo Bills football podcast after an absolute drubbing on this field behind me, 47-10. The Bills blow out the Jacksonville Jaguars, two kind of darlings of the offseason. And the Jaguars picked up steam over the course of the offseason. It wasn't always that way, but they made some moves. They draft Brian Thomas Jr. And by the time we got to the season, some people were talking about them as division winners, contenders, the Miami Dolphins, contenders. We saw what the Cardinals did in week 2 after the Bills beat them in week 1. But now we sit here, Ryan, the Buffalo Bills 3-0 on the back of two absolute dominant performances. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Matt. I mean, second stress-free game covering in terms of there's the fan stress and then there's like the media member stress where you're like changing your headline minute by minute as the game's getting close to the end because you don't know how it's going to go. This is like the second game in a row we've been able to kick our feet up at halftime and know the story. Another blowout win for the Bills. This team, since the second half of the Arizona game in week 1, has been the best team in football, and they showed it again tonight and, exercised some demons in terms of defeating a Jacksonville team that had their number the last two matchups.
Shout is brought to you, as always, by Tops Friendly Markets. And right now it is the rush to the Tops Red Zone. Get game day ready with Tops. Score big savings, winning recipes, and everything you need for the ultimate game day experience. Head over to Tops Red Zone in-store for all your game day essentials and more, and let Tops take care of you on game day. And honestly, Ryan, this has been a stretch for the Bills that I feel like a lot of fans, media members, mostly national media members, have kind of feared, right? Like they got to get through this first 6-game stretch and see where they kind of stand at the end of it. And I know it is a daunting 3-game road trip coming up. We could be singing a completely different tune in about a month's time. But as we sit here right now, I think definitively with how good they've been on the defensive side of the ball and the offensive side of the ball, this is the best team in football. That's number one. Better than the Minnesota Vikings. And I know the Vikings have been dominant. I know that defense is really good. But I think what Josh Allen is doing is a little bit different than the surprise factor of Sam Darnold in an offense where you're teaming up with Justin Jefferson. You finally have some stability around you. And he's had a great run. But I'm wondering how teams are going to adjust to that. So I'm pulling things back. And the Vikings have been great. But I think this Bills team, with the way that they're winning 5 straight touchdown drives. And honestly, Ryan, if it wasn't so dominant and you shift gears to the second half, I'm not so sure that they don't keep that train moving. That kind of the dampering of things with the Jacksonville Jaguars coming out and getting that touchdown and flipping momentum a little bit. The Bills end up with a field goal on their 6th drive. But in this game, the Bills went 5 touchdowns, field goal, punt, field goal, touchdown, end of game. The Bills only were stopped on one of their 10 drives in this game, except for the other one where the time ran out. It was really a superb performance. I know there were issues on the defensive side of the ball for Jacksonville. I got a text message before we started this podcast from a friend of mine, and he goes, I have one big question for your podcast. Is this more of a product of the Bills being great or the teams that they're playing? Where do you fall on that right now?
I fall on the Bills being great. You mentioned Jacksonville was without some of their players on the back end in that secondary. Buffalo has been without Matt Milano, without Terrell Bernard, Taron Johnson, and this is the second straight game that they have shut down an offense that is supposed to be able to put up and produce a lot of points. Obviously, in that Miami game on Thursday night, Tua was healthy for the first half plus of that game, and they shut him down. They shut that offense down. You go into this week against Jacksonville, a team that is truly desperate, 0-2. They know what the NFL history says about teams that fall to 0-3 in terms of making the playoffs, and they come in here with Balen Spector, with Jamarcus Ingram, Cam Lewis, DeMar Hamlin, all these guys that you weren't necessarily expecting to play a big role this season. And all these guys are stepping up with all of these major factors on the defense not playing. So to be 3-0 at this point, to lock down these two offenses that have plenty of weapons in the last 2 weeks, I think it speaks volumes about the defensive coaching, the defensive talent, and the next man up mentality. And then on the offensive side of the ball, how Joe Brady has been the best offensive coordinator in this league, and how Josh Allen is just dialing it up and reading these defenses, knowing exactly where the ball needs to go, play after play.
I think that to hold the Miami and Jacksonville offenses to 10 points in consecutive weeks tells you where this defense is at, number one. And that to me is like the biggest concern heading into this stretch. No Taron Johnson, no Matt Milano. I'm sitting back thinking, man, this could get real ugly. Maybe the Bills will have to win in a shootout. It's funny, I was listening to a clip from Cam Newton's podcast came up, and I actually have it. I wanted to share it on X, but I just didn't get around to it yet. And he said he wasn't a believer going into this week in the Bills because he doesn't know how they'll handle themselves in a shootout. And it's like, how do you come away with watching this offense over the first 2 weeks? And now specifically, I'll be interested to see how Cam Newton responds to this game, to see the way that they operate, play in and play out. I brought this up to a couple players in the locker room. It feels like they're inevitable right now, doesn't it? I mean, you think about Thanos in the Avengers movies, right? No matter what the Avengers tried to do, he just kept coming with just unstoppable force. I feel like that's the Bills' offense right now. Wherever they go, you have Keon Coleman. We're going to get to that in a minute. He was benched for the first quarter. We'll talk about that. He comes in, and in his fourth play of the game in the second quarter, goes for a 24-yard touchdown. Khalil Shakir, Ryan, he has not dropped a targeted pass all season again. This is a guy that I think was at, I got to go look up the exact stats, but I think he had only one of the targeted throws that he had last year. He didn't come away with a catch, and he had no drops last season. We're talking about the most reliable wide receiver in professional football right now.
Yeah, it's been unreal to watch. And, maybe the best part of it for me has been watching how the game plan can change on a week to week basis. We saw how run heavy they were in this, in the first half against Arizona, how they were run heavy against the Dolphins to the tune of 3 James Cook first half touchdowns. And then they come out today and they start firing the ball. They're throwing it around. They're not game plan, they're going to go into these games with what they think is the best game plan for the opponent. They're not going to just stick with some kind of formula. And Josh Allen comes out today and he's spreading the ball around. He's hitting Shakir, who doesn't drop anything. Dalton Kincaid makes a big play down the sideline in the back of the end zone. You have so many different weapons, so many different guys on offense scoring touchdowns through the air, on the ground. It goes back to that everyone eats mentality, where there is no ego, there is no, stat padding. Guys are just happy for one another, and you're seeing that. And you're right, this offense has been unbelievable. And one big reason why they've been so unbelievable is this offensive line, Matt. Second straight week where Josh Allen has pretty much not been touched all game. I did see that the Jacksonville was credited with 1 quarterback hit tonight after Miami was credited with 0 the week before that. Josh Allen with the hand injury, you saw how he was kind of handing it off with his right hand with these little backwards handoffs. You worry about him a little bit, but he's not taking any hits right now. He is just protected so well back there. He had all day to pass the ball. They weren't as dominant in terms of run blocking tonight, but by the end of the night, they were better there. This offensive line has been better than any unit that they've put together. And again, it's a small sample size. It's 3 weeks. But that unit as well has been such a big factor to the dominance for the last 10 quarters for this Bills offense.
The Bills took a big gamble with the way that they were going to reshape this offense, right? And the players that they brought in. And I got to say, like, at times in the offseason, even I was a bit perplexed. As much as I really believed in the pivot off of Stephon Diggs, as the shock of the trade first happened, there was so much success with the two of them. And you start to get away from that a little bit and kind of put your head around the ideology of the shift. And I think I got more comfortable with it as time went along. But then you kind of land at, okay, Mac Hollins as a guy that's going to have a predominant role in your offense. Curtis Samuel felt like a really good fit. Then you have Keon Coleman, who they go out and draft, who was about the most polarizing wide receiver prospect in the draft. And you start to wonder, okay, can this thing be built around Dalton Kincaid? And I think what we are seeing through 3 weeks is exactly what the projection was for this thing to work, is that teams cannot key in on one guy. When you try to take one guy away, there's 3 or 4 other players that can find a way to make plays in this game. Now, the interesting thing in this game was the Keon Coleman absence in the first quarter, because he played 91% of the snaps last week against the Miami Dolphins. As you're going through this first quarter, 10 plays, 20 plays, no sign of Keon Coleman. Sean McDermott revealed after the game, Coleman was benched for an issue related to being late. I did find out that it wasn't today where he was late. It wasn't late to the game or anything like that. So he knew going into the game that he wasn't going to play the first quarter. He comes out, responds, and this is what Sean McDermott said about how Keon Coleman responded to, a challenging situation. This is, your first home Monday Night Football game, and you got to sit out in the first quarter. I'm very impressed with how Keon handled it. And then to go out there and catch the touchdown pass, I know how important his teammates are to him, and this will be a learning opportunity for him. I think it's easy to forget, Ryan. Keon Coleman, still 21 years old, just turned 21 less than a month ago. And this is a kid that has a lot on his shoulders, knowing the player that was in this offense in kind of his role last year and the last 4 years. But I thought that was a big moment for him after he didn't have any catches last week against the Dolphins.
Yeah, and Sean McDermott put it perfectly. It's a learning opportunity. It's a learning experience for Keon Coleman to understand the expectations of this team, to make sure it doesn't happen again. There were no red flags on Keon Coleman in terms of this being an issue with him at Florida State or anything like that. So I think that's just all it is. It's a one-time deal. It's something where this young kid's going to realize, okay, I need to make sure that I'm on time for practice. I'm on time for whatever the Bills need me for. And going forward, I'm sure you will see that. But he made the most of that chance once he got into the game, ran a great route to get open for that touchdown, created some separation down the field, and did the rest in terms of getting into the end zone on that would-be tackle attempt. So had to feel good for Coleman to score that touchdown, but, learning experience indeed.
A couple things on Josh Allen before we move on here. Justin Tyndale with the super chat. Thank you so much. Steph, who thought Josh had no weapons. I think it's actually pretty fitting, and I feel like it tells the story. Yesterday in the Houston Texans game, Stephon Diggs targeted 10 times, or I don't know how many targets, but 10 catches, 94 yards. It felt like it was a grind every time the ball was in his hands, and the Texans get blown out. And then you look at this game today, and Josh Allen, 10 different receivers catch a ball in this pass. Josh Allen goes 3 straight games now to start the season for the first time in his career without an interception. And I think that there's a freedom to the way that Josh Allen is playing. And I want to read this tweet. Ben DiNucci, Josh Allen is going to make a run at MVP this year. He tweeted during this game. Was fun being around him for a few weeks. He's in a different tier when it comes to spinning it. And this is a guy that just got to spend a few weeks inside the building with Josh Allen. Shout out to Deanna Franco, one of our newest YouTube members, where you always your comments show up first. That's really cool. Welcome, Deanna. It was just a exemplary performance from who I think is the MVP through 3 weeks of the NFL season.
Yeah, definitely the front runner. It felt like he had Offensive Player of the Week locked up at halftime with the 4 touchdowns through the air. He made a few dangerous passes tonight in the end zone that could have been intercepted, but that was with the game already well out of hand.
Heat checks.
What's that? Some heat checks.
Just
pretty much.
When you're a shooter and you're making them for 3.
Like NBA Jam, when you're on fire, you just start chucking up from half court. Eventually, you're going to miss one of them, but they fell to the ground harmlessly tonight. He was playing outstanding football. So I agree with you. He's in his this zone right now, and he's answered every question in terms of how he's played through these first 3 weeks. He's had to be Superman in week 1 against Arizona in that second half. He was just kind of in the back seat against Miami, and he was more than okay with that. And then, tonight it was a whole team effort, but the way that he spread the ball around and found his guys and touchdown after touchdown after touchdown, first time scores for a lot of guys on this offense, first time interceptions and sacks, a lot of first times tonight in this game. But Josh Allen, not the first time he's done this, and it won't be the last time.
from Nate Tice during the game near the end of the first half. Josh Allen's EPA per dropback currently stands at 0.62 through 10 quarters. That would be the highest by any NFL quarterback through the first 3 weeks of the season since 2016. Talking about a quarterback who the biggest knock on him is the mistakes and the chances that he's taking. There's not a more efficient player at the quarterback position through 3 weeks in the league, and there hasn't been anybody better since 2016. We're seeing, I think, the full vision come together. And one of the things that I think we talked about, maybe it was on one of the road trip to Pittsburgh, is like, you don't want to look at numbers like this because I know Bills fans especially are very superstitious, and you don't want to put the cart before the horse and everything like that. But if you think about the Tom Brady Peyton Manning rivalry, people forget that like Peyton Manning came into the league, Tom Brady came into the league about the same time. I think it was a little bit different than Allen and Mahomes, but because Manning came in first. But Brady had, I think, 3 Super Bowls before Peyton Manning finally broke through and won his first. It's very similar to the arc of Patrick Mahomes. You can't make an argument, I think, at this point, watching the way that Josh Allen is playing through the first part of the season, that these haven't been the 2 best quarterbacks definitively over the last 4 years. And I think he's putting an exclamation point on it this year. And I think it feels like he's coming for it in a way that is different. And of course, it's just 3 games. It's going to get harder. We're going to learn more about this team over the next 3 games. But to just kind of put the exclamation point on it, you're in an era of an all-time great in Patrick Mahomes, but that doesn't mean that it's insurmountable and you can't reimagine this thing to finally break through. And we're going to talk about some of the defensive performances tonight. I want to talk about Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid, but to put an exclamation point on Josh Allen, this to me is the best 3-game stretch of his career because of who he's doing it with, who he's doing it without, and what this team now is on both sides of the ball as almost the contender or one of the top contenders with the Chiefs in the whole entire NFL.
Yeah, listen, there were a lot of people in the national media expecting Allen to fall on his face without a number 1 weapon, thinking that the window was closed. But the Bills have shown that the Super Bowl window is wide open. And I get it. It's 3 games. It's a small sample size. But with the way they're rolling on both sides of the ball, if they can continue this and, finish with anywhere from 12, 13, 14 wins, all projections that we've discussed here on the show over the last few months, if they can get into the playoffs the way that they've played this complementary football, the way Bobby Babbitt's just calling it on defense down multiple men, the way that Joe Brady is calling it on offense, the coordinators are kind of, they're working so well with their units. Allen is just taking what's given to him and realizing he doesn't have to be that home run hitter. He can take single after single after single, and they're moving the ball. And when they get down there toward the end zone, that's when he is Josh Allen. He can use his legs to create and to hold the ball longer until someone gets open the back of the end zone. He can run, as he showed on some situations tonight, 3rd and 11, where he moves the chains with his legs. He is so dangerous, but right now, he hasn't even had to be yet. And there will be games this season. Next week against Baltimore could be a good example where, he might have to play Superman again. They look pretty good on the offensive side of the ball in that game. But through 3 weeks, he's playing lights out, top of the league in terms of the MVP conversation. And you have to feel really good about if you're a Bills fan, because we talked about this first 6-game stretch as one of the hardest stretches, if not the hardest stretch of the year. And right now they're sitting at 3-0 with some dominant football in the last 2 games, especially.
I mentioned my buddy Sam, who sent me that question to start the podcast, and he also just sent me a next gen stats tweet. Bills right tackle Spencer Brown did not allow a single pressure on 35 pass blocking snaps, his 3rd straight game without allowing a pressure this season. Brown is the only offensive lineman league wide with at least 25 pass blocking snaps and 0 pressures allowed through 3 weeks. So we're talking about a guy that just got paid, and literally has been the most dominant offensive lineman in pass blocking in the entire NFL. And this is a guy that coming into the league, he was more known as a run blocker, his physicality in the run game, his evolution under Aaron Kromer, and now the Bills' decision to gamble early, extend him early, and probably get him at a fraction of the cost. Can you imagine the conversation we'd be having right now after this game, Ryan, with that tweet that we just read? If the extension hadn't been done, what it's going to likely cost this offseason? The Bills get a bargain once again. Brandon Beane continues to work, with a lot of these contracts, and they're in a really good spot with this offensive line.
I'm starting to wonder if Brandon Beane has some kind of like short-term, time machine where he can go ahead and just see, okay, these guys are playing down. He did with Ed Oliver last year, and he had some people saying, I don't know if that's the right time to give him that kind of money. And now with the way defensive tackles are paid, he's been pushed down the ladder so far as is, and he's been dominant, or some of the best football of his career. He pays Spencer Brown, and he had a really good year, but should they have paid him already? Well, through three games, yes, it looks like a very smart move. He has dominated on the edges. He has held his own against some pretty good pass rushers. We've talked about some of the challenges that Jacksonville posed in terms of pass rush threats. They were kept at bay tonight. Josh Allen was kept clean all evening long, and a lot of that had to do with the play of Spencer Brown, Deion Dawkins, and the rest of that O-line.
We got a super chat here from Bernardo, our friend in Brazil. Hello, Bernardo. McDermott not calling the defense. Offensive great after Brady. I mean, this is something we talked about that was key in the decision to give the job to Bobby Babich, is to free Sean McDermott up to truly be the CEO, let two talented play callers do their job on both sides of the ball. And man, through 3 weeks, is there anybody with a higher approval rating? I would argue that Brady's approval rating through, what is it now with the playoffs, maybe around 15, 16 games now, might be higher at this stage right now with this start to the season than at any point in the Brian Daboll era. Obviously, Ken Dorsey, Rick Dennison for one season. I mean, it's forgettable, right? Like, that was a forgettable season. But I don't know, Ryan. It's like, I was about to call you Brian. It's late. It's almost midnight, like on a Monday night. But to Joe Brady, the job that he's done, again, 4th and 3. They didn't even need the timeout this week. They were in the Jacksonville side of things. They get aggressive. They get really creative with Khalil Shakir now this week being the motion man. He gets the ball in space for a first down, leading to their first touchdown. He's in his bag right now.
Yeah, he is absolutely in his bag right now. By far the best play calling that we've seen from Bills offensive coordinator. That's no knock on Brian Daboll, who at one point the Bills were on a heater in the playoffs under him. They've had some great moments, but there's been head-scratching moments as well, like the 9-6 loss to Jacksonville a few years ago, and games like that where it's kind of like, what's going on with this offense? Why can't they have that continuity in terms of looking so great on a week-to-week basis? And this offense through 3 weeks has scored 30-plus points. You see the routes, Matt, just that Joe Brady dials up, where the touchdown pass to Khalil Shakir, Allen has his eyes on Keon Coleman on the double move. And when it's not there, he just looks over, and because of where Keon Coleman is going down the field, it clears out that path for Shakir as long as he's winning his route. Those routes that he has, that whether it's the pre-snap motion, there always seems to be a plan B if plan A isn't there, where it felt like with Ken Dorsey, sometimes what he drew up, plan A was there and it was great. But if it wasn't, there was nothing else. And none of the other routes made a lot of sense that were being run on that play. Rick Dennison, I'm not even going to talk much about him. But Brian Daboll, for the moments of greatness, there were those lapses in it. And you have to see this over the course of the full season. We've said this multiple times. It's only 3 games. But there's so much to be encouraged about with Joe Brady. There's so much to be encouraged about with Bobby Babich, with how he's dialing up this defense. You saw, even the depth guys tonight. Casey Toohill, sack, fumble recovery. Javon Solomon, first career sack. Von Miller, the way that, not only did he get a sack and a turnover on downs in this game, he played a factor, I think, in the 2 false starts on that drive, along with the Bills Mafia in attendance. They're getting after the quarterback. Babich is dialing up great plays on that side of the ball as well. And I'm sure McDermott has his thumbprints and fingerprints all over the game plan throughout the week, but he's letting his coaches coach. And now through 3 weeks, this offense and defense has been 2 of the best units in the league.
I want to get to this defense because there's a bunch of performances that we got to talk about, but there's so much on the offensive side of the ball too. I mean, this offensive line is one of the most underappreciated storylines at the beginning of the season. So spending a little time talking about that is important. And I also want to spend a minute here talking to you about the Shout Insider text line, Ryan. I was absolutely cooking today.
Yeah, you
Before the game, we're answering a lot of questions, interacting with all of our Shout Insiders. We're on the road to 500. And if you haven't joined the Insider text line yet, what are you waiting for? 2-week free trial, $3.99 a month. After that, just text 716-528-6727. Gives you access to Ryan and myself. One of our regular insiders, Mark, he came out this week to Buffalo Kickoff Live. He comes to a bunch of our live show. Dude, the dude crushed 2 orders of Boom Boom Shrimp at New York Beer Project. So my new nickname for him is Big Boom Boom. And he even says his buddies call him Boomer, I guess. So there you go. But the Shout text line is brought to you by Carrie C. Beyer, attorney with the law offices of Francis M. Litra, located at 237 Main Street in Buffalo, New York. If you or someone you know is seriously injured, give Carrie a call, 716-852-1234, or check out litralaw.com. Shout out to our insiders, man. They've really made our beat coverage so much more exciting, the interactive nature. Boomer's in the house right now. I see him in the comments here. So shout out to all of you. David, who's an insider and also a subscriber on the YouTube side. You guys are all awesome. Let's talk about Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid, Ryan, because again tonight, both of these guys find a way to make big time plays. The touchdown play, of course, we could talk about Josh Allen's play, as he had a lane to run on the Dalton Kincaid touchdown, but instead he works around Spencer Brown's block, times it perfectly, kind of comes out the backside, runs to his right side, and fires an absolute dart to a Dalton Kincaid who's kind of streamlining in the back of the end zone. Perfect play, perfect catch. It was a really nice play for Dalton Kincaid. I thought he had a really good game. I know it's only 3 catches, but the impact, you felt it from Dalton Kincaid tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And after the game, he said it best. He goes, on that play, I thought to myself, well, there's no way I'm getting the ball here. But instead of giving up on the play he finished. He saw where Josh Allen was going. He reversed route. He ran in the back of the end zone. He created a lane for Allen to throw that ball past the defender and between a few defenders for that matter. And Allen delivered on that play. So not giving up on plays is so big. He got open down the field on a big gainer for this team. In week 1, we saw Arizona sometimes putting 4 guys on him. He was the guy they wanted to stop. And Miami also put a lot of players on Kincaid. And now you're starting to see him free up a little bit because you've seen James Cook step up. You've seen Khalil Shakir step up. So as teams realize you can't just take one man out, it's going to open up more opportunities for Kincaid. But he had a nice night tonight. And then with Shakir as well, you can't say enough good things about that pass catcher for the Bills.
All right, dude, really? Every time.
What
is going on? Midnight, right?
Midnight. He loved it. Yeah. It's almost midnight.
Yeah, you're a scoundrel, Midnight. I see you getting involved in the shot action, but listen, we're up. We're talking.
He wants camera time.
Deanna Franco, new to the YouTube membership. This team of mine is on fire. I'm in southern Utah, screaming with happiness. We have Brian Auman in the chat as well, one of our insiders. He said he was hoping for a fat guy touchdown on that Casey Two-Hill play late in the game. So bad. Shout out to everybody in the chat. On Shakir, though, I think what he's done over the last 2 seasons, and obviously we're only 3 games in, but to go 3 games and have 14 targets and 14 catches, I don't think you can overstate how important that is to the success that Josh Allen is having. The way that he wins, the run after the catch that he's offering this team that has been in search of that for the past few seasons, it feels like they have so many flavors at pass catcher that gives the Bills a chance to consistently move the ball, consistently put the defense in a bind. And man, Jacksonville I know that they're a man-heavy team, and the question all week was whether or not they were going to flip it up and play some zone. But if you're not good at zone, that's the danger about playing against Josh Allen. He's going to find spots to beat you in that area as well. You want to play too high, you want to sit back, he's going to get aggressive and run on you. The Bills are going to get going in the run game. it just feels right now like there's no good way to defend this offense, and that's a good thing for the Bills.
Absolutely. And with zone defense, Khalil Shakir knows exactly where to sit. It's Josh Allen said it tonight. He's a guy that knows exactly where to be when I need to get the ball out, and I can count on him time and time again. He hauls everything in. You've already mentioned it. He doesn't drop anything. He's so reliable there. And if you try man defense, he can get open there too. Creating separation is not an issue for him. It's not an issue for guys, a guy like Curtis Samuel on this team. But when it comes to zone, he's absolutely lethal in that area. And you look at Jacksonville; they were down a few guys on the back end of the defense. They lost their nickel cornerback early in the game to an injury too, and I'm sure that adjusted what they were trying to do in terms of man versus zone. But no matter what they did, it did not work tonight. They could not get pressure up front. Their guys could not cover long enough if they were in man, if they were in zone. There were just soft spots for the Bills to exploit, and Josh Allen took those shots each and every time.
Coming to you from Highmark Stadium, the Bills 47-10 tonight over the Jacksonville Jaguars. If you're just tuning in, this was a complete and utter dominant performance by the Bills offense, but I don't think you could say enough, Ryan, about what this defense is continuing to do in kind of the background. You have a Jacksonville Jaguars team tonight that went 2 for 13 on third down, 4 of 8 on fourth down, a desperation kind of game for them on fourth down where they were going for it on their own side of the field. I mean, just trying to get anything going. The Bills shutting things down in the red zone, 1 for 4 for the red zone as well. 68 offensive plays tonight for the Jacksonville Jaguars. They averaged 3.5 yards per game, finishing with 239 for the game. And then you think about interception, Damar Hamlin. We got to talk about that. Forced fumble recovery. Huge game for this defense across the board.
Absolutely. You look up front. I thought early on in the game, Matt, the defensive line wasn't getting home enough. I thought that they were kind of kept at bay, but as the game went on, you started to see the plays up front with Epinesa, Von Miller, Casey Toohill, Javon Solomon. You saw some push up front. The linebackers were very good tonight. I thought Balen Spector had a solid game for this team. Dorian Williams had a great hit on Trevor Lawrence on one of those third down plays to keep him just short of the line of gain. And they did convert on that next play. I believe it was with a QB sneak. But he had a nice play. But on the back end, they were so good at taking away the wide receivers. Gabe Davis had a tough night at the office, exited the game with some sort of injury late. Brian Thomas Jr. had his moments, but for the most part couldn't get going in this system. They have Christian Kirk. They have so many good wide receivers, but the Bills were just locking them up and taking away a lot of the passing lanes. Trevor Lawrence, the footwork was not great even when the Bills weren't getting pressure on him. The defense was locked in for another game, and you feel good knowing that it's just a matter of time before Taron Johnson's going to be back here. It's been a few games since he's been out, but he's obviously getting closer. Terrell Bernard avoided a serious injury. He should be back in the near future, you would think. And if they're holding down the fort this way, keeping Jacksonville to 10 points in a game where they absolutely needed to have it and they just demoralized that team, they keep a guy like Tyreek Hill the week before that to 3 catches, 24 yards. It speaks volumes about how dominant this unit has been.
I'm trying to do the quick math here, Ryan. So do you have a calculator out?
I can get one on my phone.
Yeah, get the calculator out real quick, and I want you to add these numbers up for me. Tell me when you're ready. You ready? You got that? You got that calculator out? All right. 69, nice. Plus 30.
Okay.
You good so far?
Oh, yeah.
All right. So then I want you to add to that 19.
Yep.
And then I want you to add 23. Okay. What do we got there? What's that add up to? 141 straight passes by Josh Allen since his last interception. And it might actually be a little bit more than that because he had 2 interceptions in the last game of the last year's regular season, but he didn't throw a pick in either of the playoff games last year. Now 3 straight to start the season. Has the narrative Does it have to change on Josh Allen? Do we have to, on Tuesday morning, start talking about Josh Allen as a quarterback that doesn't make mistakes, but still finds a way to make elite plays in bunches, kind of juxtaposed to Patrick Mahomes, who I believe has thrown 4 interceptions in his first 3 games to start this season? It's crazy how that narrative is kind of in front of our very eyes as we go here to start the season, flipping.
Absolutely. And you look at what's going on with Patrick Mahomes, some baffling interceptions, uh, bad ones against the Bengals that ultimately did not cost the team. Had a really bad one this past week as well, where you look at the throw and you wonder what he's trying to do because it was just easily intercepted. The defense is, in the case of the Atlanta game, the defender was Justin Simmons, a guy that's had success against Mahomes, played it perfectly in terms of making it look like he wasn't going to be there and jump the route. But Mahomes is the one that's having the issues. And tonight they talked about how since Lawrence has entered the league, he's had the most turnovers at the quarterback position, more than Josh Allen over that stretch of time. And no interceptions right now. He had the fumble in week 1 against Arizona, but the narrative does need to change because the more that it gets brought up in terms of the talking heads, the national media saying, oh, he's got to avoid the turnovers, the more foolish they're going to sound if he keeps doing this, where he is protecting the football and they're marching up and down the field and scoring points. Because right now he's answered every question about the turnovers. And yes, there's some luck involved with that. You mentioned the heat checks tonight, some of the throws to the end zone that could have been picked off, but through 3 games, no interceptions, and the narrative should change at some point here in the near future.
Got a super chat here from Donald Darko on YouTube. Wish Kyer Elam got that pick 6. But I want to say MVP Josh Allen, Super Bowl or bust. No more excuses. Thank you for the super chat. It would have been a cool little side story if Kyer Elam was able to pick that one off there at the end. He got his first action of the season. It's going to take an injury for it to or garbage time to get him on the field because of how well Christian Benford and Rasul Douglas are playing. But up front, let's shift gears for a second. There's one more thing. Let's not get out of here before we talk about James Cook, because that's something that I want to put maybe the bow on this episode. But Von Miller, AJ Epinesa, Greg Rousseau with a pressure, and I think it was Jamarcus Ingram that actually got the sack on that early play, but it was Greg Rousseau who I thought had the pressure. Across the board, to your point, it was a slow start, but it's like when it came in bunches. It came at important times of the game. Von Miller had a pressure. It looked like he was starting to speed up, and then he comes on the next play, sacks Trevor Lawrence to force turnover on downs. Then you have AJ Epinesa with a sack on one play, comes back on the next play with a huge pressure and gets a hit on Trevor Lawrence. That's what you want to see. You want to see these guys taking advantage of matchups, especially against this offensive line. And I think looking ahead to next week, there's going to be opportunities against that Baltimore Ravens offensive line. You have to figure the Bills are going to game plan against their running game. It's going to be a more physical running game with Derrick Henry. Sean McDermott has a great history against Lamar Jackson, but make him be a passer, pin your ears back, get back in the backfield, and force them to make plays. And I thought that over the course of the game, the Bills front really wore on the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, and shout out to Dan Orlovsky during the game tonight. He and Louis Riddick were talking about how this defensive front, with light boxes, has done such a good job in terms of the physicality that they bring. And Baltimore's going to be a tough task. We know what Derrick Henry brings to the table as a runner, but they did a nice job last year when he was in Tennessee of shutting him down quite a bit. You have to be careful of Lamar Jackson with the pass rush. If you miss him, he can get around you and he can get big gains. But the Bills have done such a good job of containment on him in the past that it's going to be fun to see what Bobby Babich does dial up, what Sean McDermott and he talked about throughout the course of the week leading up to that game. Because with the guys that they're down on the defensive side of the ball, there's going to be some opportunities for Baltimore to try to go after the linebackers. And we've heard this week after week, and no one's done it yet, but eventually someone might have some success. So I am intrigued to see what the defense does, but you have to be encouraged. You're right. It came in bunches early on in the night. Greg Rousseau had a hit on Lawrence. It was a low hit, but he got held into him. So it was actually ended up being an offensive penalty. But as the night went on, you saw more and more comfort from the defensive line in terms of getting after the QBs. it's going to be fun to watch and see how they continue to develop over the course of the season.
Excuse me. I want to read something off to you, Ryan, and then we'll flip over and talk about Cook before we get out of here. Average annual salary at quarterback. I got SpockTrack.com up right now. I'm going to read some of these off to you. Trevor Lawrence, 55 million AAV. Tua Tagovailoa, 53.1 AAV. Kyler Murray, 46.1 AAV. And I'm not even talking about getting all the way down to 14 and Josh Allen coming in at 43 million AAV. But those are three that I just listed off, including Kyler Murray. Three of the top 10 highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL. And the Bills absolutely shut down two and a half of them. A half of Kyler. Kyler had a pretty good half to open the season. That was the first, adjustments were made. And I thought, 10 quarters here against those three quarterbacks. The Buffalo Bills defense at all three levels, without Taron Johnson, without Matt Milano, for a portion without Terrell Bernard. I mean, this has been absolutely spectacular. I mean, the approval rating on Bobby Babbage, I talked about at the beginning on Joe Brady. It's off the charts for Bobby Babbage as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Kyler Murray was dealing in the first half of the game against Buffalo, and then they limited him to, in the offense of the Cardinals, to like 80 yards or something in the second half, the way they shut that down. And we've seen how successful Murray has been this season. That's no small feat in terms of the way they played him. Miami had no answers at quarterback. And then tonight, same thing with Trevor Lawrence. And Lawrence looked uncomfortable back there. The footwork was sloppy. He airmailed the pass that was intercepted by Damar Hamlin, a nice feel-good story tonight. But he was off the mark quite a bit, and the Bills are flustering these quarterbacks. And now it's going to have to be Lamar Jackson and C.J. Stroud. And, not to get too far ahead to the Stroud and the Houston Texans game, but Brian Flores put together a great blueprint in terms of how to frustrate Stroud in that offense. And I'm sure the Bills will try to replicate aspects of that in a few weeks' time.
We have almost 2,500 watching across all platforms right now, which is super cool for 12:15 a.m. on the East Coast. Before we get out of here, Ryan, James Cook was awesome tonight. He led the Bills in total yards outside of Josh Allen, of course. I think he had 87 all-purpose yards, had the rushing touchdown. He goes to 3 on the season. In 3 games, he had 2 rushing touchdowns all of last season. But, man, we got to talk about that drop, man. That is the just thorn in the side of James Cook's career. I mean, if you want to talk about his kryptonite, I mean, there it is. I mean, it's being absolutely wide open, barreling down on the goal line with nobody around him and nothing but space. And that drop was just brutal. And it's one of those things that you got to continue to talk about because it continues to be a storyline. There were some misses. There were some drops during training camp. This continues to be a storyline because he's not putting it to bed. And obviously the Bills go on to score on that drive. I'm not sure if that was the Ty Johnson touchdown.
I think that was the Shakir touchdown.
The Shakir touchdown, okay. But, man, it just continues to be a storyline that we got to discuss.
Yeah, I do want to give him a little bit of grace on this one. When you look at the drops last year, some of them were throws where he was running a slant pattern or he was just kind of balls that, he's looking in. He should just catch it, run in the end zone. This was one where he's running down the field. It's over the head. You get the hands up, hit him on the hands. It was a nearly perfect pass. I said a picture perfect pass on X. It was as close to a perfect pass as can be, but that is a little bit more difficult for running backs in this league. But we definitely need to talk about it because of the drops last year. I'm willing to give him a little bit of grace on that one because that's one of the more difficult catches that you'd have to make at the running back position in this league. But I'm sure it's one that he'll say this week. It's one that he has to have and come up with.
What you all have to have right now is a trip to Tops so you can get in on this quarterback blitz. Get ready to score big with Tops quarterback blitz from September 1st to October 12th. Time's running out, Ryan. It's already September 24th. So get to Tops right now. Shop over 25 of your fan favorite brands with your bonus plus and earn a quarterback for each one you buy. There's no limit to the savings you can rack up. Score touchdowns with these deals and keep the savings rolling. Great brands like Bargs, Coca-Cola, Taco Bell, Bounty, Body Armor, Mountain Dew, Rosina, Kraft, Tostitos, Lipton, and much more. Head over to topsmarkets.com for more details. Ryan Talbot, final word.
Final word, go to Tops, get those deals, get a Tops breakfast pizza, celebrate this blowout win as the Bills look next week toward another big matchup against the Baltimore Ravens.
Dude, you got me with the breakfast pizza. I would love to just snack on that right now as I write my post-game story. But man, what a night here in Orchard Park. That's another thing. Shout out to Bills fans, man. This place was absolutely electric. It came across on TV. Our good buddy down in South Florida, Marcel Louis Jacques, was watching on his TV. And, you know, he covered this team for a couple years. He knows the vibes in this building. It came across on TV, and it was just as beautiful inside the building. The Bills improved to 3-0, 47-10 over the Jags. We'll be back later this week. Take care, everybody.